Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Brass Junkies. I'm your host, Andrew Hitz, and you are about to hear a conversation that I had with the legendary Marty Hackleman, former horn for Empire Brass, Canadian Brass, the National Symphony, the Montreal Symphony, the list goes on and on and on. This episode, however, specifically focuses on the recording of Empire Brass's legendary Class Brass album. It dawned on me that I had never done a deep dive into the recording process for this album. I never even did it with Sam back in the day. And I texted Marty, and 90 seconds later, he called me and was like, I'm in. And I am so glad that this is going to be out there. Fascinating process for how collaborative, what they decided to play. You're about to hear about these reading sessions for figuring out the arrangements where they were literally reading out of scores and saying, like, you take the viola line. I've never heard of any album being recorded like this. And the results speak for themselves. So very quickly, wanted to thank Parker Mouthpieces, who, by the way, celebrating their 10th anniversary. So congratulations to Parker Mouthpieces. Thank you for providing the hosting for the Brass Junkies. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model Tuba Mouthpiece. You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And a huge thank you to everyone who supports the Brass Junkies and conversations, important conversations like this one that you are about to hear with Marty Hackleman. Everybody that has gone to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies and helps to keep this thing going. I seriously, from the bottom of my heart, I cannot thank you enough. The bonus episode with Marty that you're about to hear, we talked about what he fears more than anything else. And he said his answer was fascinating and nuanced. He said it depended on his age at the time. And then he kind of expanded on that. And then he talked about the multiple times throughout his career that he had to rebuild his embouchure while still performing all the time and how he went about starting that. He told a story about a professional audition that he walked off of in the middle of the final round because he couldn't play a single note. That was what spurred on one of those embouchure changes, which at the time was his dream job. I've heard a lot of stories from Marty. I'd never heard that one. And then he also talked in this bonus episode about remaining relevant to yourself, which was really profound. And I'm still thinking about it a couple of days later. So you can catch all of that in the bonus episode, which will be released 1 week after the regular episode here with Marty is. There is a bonus episode with every guest that is released. That's just an extension of the conversation. Sometimes we dig a little deeper on things that we touched on in the main episode, or other times so we hit on some completely different topics. But I'm going to stop talking now so you can hear. He also talked about the recording of the Gabrielli and his contemporaries, which was billed as Empire Brass and Friends. And we talk about like all the musicians that were on that. Two of the greatest brass quintet albums ever. And he brings us behind the scenes into those recording sessions. So without further ado, let us get to this conversation that I had with horn legend Marty Hackleman. And today on the Brass Junkies, I am joined by a true legend of the horn and a friend of the show, Marty Hackleman. Marty, how are you?
I'm great, Andrew. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. I'm not as good as you since you're going to Mexico on vacation tomorrow, but some of us still have to work for a living.
Yeah. It's a tough thing to do, but somebody has to take the hit.
You're really doing God's work there, Marty.
I know. I'm trying. You're welcome.
So Marty was, I could fill the up through like the second commercial break with Marty's resume. That's only a little bit of an exaggeration. It's ridiculous how many places: Empire Brass, Canadian Brass, Principal Horn of the National Symphony. The list goes on and on. But what you are here to do today is to talk about the making of Empire Brass's Class Brass album. I have been kind of digging into my favorite brass recordings, and I'm trying to get some insights into how they were made. And I texted Marty a few days ago, and he called me like 90 seconds later with a very spirited hello. And then here we are, like on the Zoom call, fit me in right before he and his unbelievably talented wife are heading to Mexico on vacation. But he told me a little bit about this. I didn't know anything about this. So let's paint a picture here. Class Brass, which is possibly my favorite brass quintet album of all time. How did the concept for this album come about?
Well, the concept was with Telarc, and Telarc, you didn't ask Telarc; they told you what they wanted. It
Right.
was like if they told you to jump, you said how high, that
This
kind
is
of
the
thing.
record label. Yeah, very
Yeah,
prestigious record label.
Telarc was the bomb.
Yes.
Anyway, we had done, I think, the Gabrielli right before that, or one. Anyway, they came to Rolf and they said, "We want something different. We don't want the same old brass music. We want something different." And they said, "Oh, how about?" And Rolf, so I guess, sort of said, "How about transcriptions of orchestral things?" Great. And so basically, Rolf just came to us and said, "We have to do this." And he sort of, as I recall, it's been a few years. Uh, it was pretty like he needs it. We want it done this time. It's got to be done. So we didn't have a lot of time, and there was in those days, especially, there were no arrangements of orchestral stuff for brass quintet, especially if there were, they were perfunctory and like high schoolish.
Right.
So and then you look at the repertoire and like, what are we gonna do? And so it was basically Sam and Rolf and I, and Scott to some degree. Jeff had just he had not been tapped. He hadn't been in orchestra that much, didn't know that much. I was talking to him the other day after we talked, and he said, "No, it's mainly you and Rolf and Sam, because you have all the orchestral experience, and we came up with ideas. We had just lists of pieces, and then we went back and forth and say, this would work, all this, and then basically there was no music, so we just got scores from Tanglewood and a library. Rolf was able to get scores and parts, just whole orchestral things, and we would say, okay, we're going to try this. Who wants to start with a melody? And someone would say, trumpet will start, and okay, horn, why don't you take? Oh, this is a cool lick there. Let's not take that, and then let's give it over here, and then we just literally on a piece of paper and a score, right? Horn here, and then stop here, trumpet here, and then we sort of wrote out our own parts, which we really used. None of that was. I don't think any of it's published because it was
Wow.
PD, wasn't PD and stuff. So basically, it was just literally, pardon the pun, empirical. That was all put together that
Wow.
way, and it ended up being. I still every time I listen to it, thinking like that's pretty damn good, and because everybody wanted to get in on some hot licks, everybody had something interesting. It wasn't like, and of course, Rolf wanted to play melody all the time. Okay, we knew that, but we were able to wrest the little melodic lines from him sometimes. But
Physically.
it was all like, and because there was nobody said, well, it's got to be, we have some Bach, we got to have something earlier. It was completely up in the air. So it was just thrown together literally with scores on a big table, and we would just divvy up parts. And here's the viola part. Play this for a few bars and 8 bars, and then we sort of wrote it out. And Sam kind of wrote out some scores. I don't think even Egil, his Rolf's father, he didn't help out because he was only in the other stuff. He didn't do any of that. But so it was really quite just a labor of love, and just over and over doing it. And then we showed up and recorded this stuff.
Wow.
So it was very interesting to do. It's too bad that some of that music didn't get out.
Right.
And I'm not sure if some of because a lot of the Empire music and Egil stuff was very good arrangements, or tied up somehow with one of the other trumpet players or somebody. Because a few years ago I was trying to get it out through another company, and it didn't get very far. So
Right.
but
Wow. So I've never heard of a process that collaborative for coming up with an album, and I'm fascinated by a process that was that collaborative and on that kind of a deadline. It would feel like the deadline would either really help that or really hurt that. But
I
it
think
sounds like it helped it.
really helped it a lot,
Hmm.
because we knew we had to get something in there, and Tellark is not going to put up with shit. So
Right.
we knew we had to. And we spent. I mean, in those days and those rehearsals, we would spend. I mean, literally all day. Every day. Like we'd show up at 10 o'clock and stay till 6. Have a small lunch break and just play and talk and refine and make notes and stuff. So it was pretty intense, but we knew that I mean, Sam could do anything. I could do anything. Rolf was great. Jeff was very good. Scott, a great trombone player. So we knew we hit with the possibility of doing something very different, not just a regular arrangement. And as it turned out, all those arrangements are quite distinct, and the material is varied enough to where it's like, I mean, you got the Prokofiev and things like that, which is really cool. You just didn't have that many things that were ever done that way. And it was very successful, so they ended up doing another one, but I think the first one was better than the second one.
So so everybody brought list of pieces that they wanted to, and then like talk to me about this part. Could one person like veto? Because I think on the phone you told me that like that if somebody brought a piece and then somebody was like, I can't stand that piece, was it like just instantly off, or did it
Well,
depend
you
on
had to
which person
convince
it
them.
was?
I mean, if more people liked the piece than not,
Mm-hmm.
then everybody, it was like, okay, let's give it a shot. Let's give it a try.
Okay.
So, but honestly, not that many people. It, as I recall, it wasn't about not liking the piece. We couldn't come up with a convincing arrangement for five brass.
Ah.
So it wasn't like, because almost all the music you couldn't say like, okay, so you don't like Beethoven, seriously? Okay, or whatever, because there's none of those pieces are on there. It was too weird or avant-garde or too strange.
Mm-hmm.
It was a question of, can we pull it off?
Right.
And we'd finally work on it and said, we love this piece, but we like it doesn't have legs for us. We can't get it to work.
Right.
So there was more of that than anything else.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. There's an absolute art form to boiling like an entire orchestral piece down to
Yeah,
only 5 parts. I don't care how strong the players are, and
right.
having it, be a convincing artistic version of it. That's a real
Well,
art to that.
Sam was brilliant at, or arranging and stuff. So he was once we had it down, he knew what line needed to come out in order to fill out the chord with only 5 voices. He
Okay.
knew how to infer things like that better than we did, for the
Okay.
most part. So he was really brilliant at that. So he I have to give him most credit for that, because he could, like, okay, that works, but we need this line over here. So you take that for a little bit, etc.
Wow. And so were you all like handwriting these parts,
Yeah.
like, yeah, like in real time? And so,
Mm-hmm.
and you would try something and then Sam would propose something. I mean, anybody, but just in this instance,
Right.
Sam says something and then you try it. And then he either says, yeah, or he says, wait, actually, why don't you swap?
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of thing.
He didn't direct everything totally by himself, but
Sure.
we would just, we had manuscript paper and pencils, and you'd have a viola score and say, okay, I got to take the viola line here for a little bit, and then somebody take the clarinet. We need the clarinet over here, and so you would mark it and then try to sight read it as best you could, transposing it, set, and then go away and then write it out during a break.
Wow.
So it was a real hot mess, but it was really fun because you weren't hemmed in by anything,
Right.
you know. So it was really cool. Loved it.
Wow. I'm like, I'm trying to, you told me that happened like 3 days ago on the phone, and I've still been trying to wrap my head around the fact that you all are like, reading things in like alto clef and like, like splicing lines here
Yeah,
or there.
that's
And
what we had to do, because we didn't have the technology, of course.
of
All you
course,
had was a score,
right?
and then you had your parts, because you couldn't read the score very easily usually in page turn. So you'd find, okay, go get the clarinet part, and we dig it out, or
Wow.
whatever, and
Wow.
then we just cobble it together. Yeah, it was really good, and it was, like I say, it was rewarding and uh, challenging, but we knew we had to come up with something. So we were pretty flexible and like, okay, we could do this. Especially we knew. I'm trying to remember how much of it after the recording we did perform much of it, but some of the pieces we didn't perform that one. I remember the one on Class Brass, was it Dance of the Comedians, with like 2 minute the trumpet thing. You
Mm-hmm.
remember that one? That's a really
Yes.
fast technical. Okay.
Yep.
By the time we got to the recording, it was nothing but double tonguing for draw. When you hear the recording, now it's about a minute and under 2 minutes, that piece. Okay, we were told, because Rolf couldn't play it at first for quite a while. The recording on his part alone for that small piece, there were 27 cuts in his solo line alone,
Wow.
because he couldn't play it. And
Right.
even when we took it on the road, it was a hot mess for
Right.
months before he got it down.
Wow.
So I mean, it wasn't like, and that was the biggest example of like, this is just a mess. But he insisted on playing it, but it was not performed in recording. That was put together.
Wow.
But he did eventually learn it. But I mean, so there were a lot of those pieces were that way. We did. I remember we played that Prokofiev thing with a bunch of high Bs for me all the time. We did do that all the time, and there were some other ones too. I think the Procession Nobles we often opened with that. And
Yep.
so
I
there are a
remember that.
number of them that worked out really well. It's just too bad it didn't get published.
Yeah. And so um the parts that you ended up recording off of, did those end up like, did the spliced together parts end up being given to a copyist, and like so you actually had like printed parts, or what did that
We
look like?
didn't have printed. I don't recall having printed parts. They were manuscript. We wrote it out.
Okay.
And I don't recall having printed parts.
Okay.
And again, there was no technology to do that. We could have hired somebody, but I mean, Rob wasn't going to do that. You had your own parts. I mean, it was like my arrangement of boats to the on foray. I wrote out one night, brought it in the next day, and
Hmm.
those manuscript parts in pencil
Hmm.
with erasing and circling and change of notes was what we played on for years.
Wow.
You know, and
Wild.
I still have Xeroxes of those beat up parts.
Wow. I wonder if any of the guys still have any of their parts to this.
I wonder. I wonder. I don't. I mean, when I left the group, obviously I had to leave those behind.
Of
But,
course. Yeah.
but
Yeah, there you
yeah,
go.
yeah.
How long, how many days was the initial sessions where you came up with the list of what you were going to play that you then sent to Telarc?
Oh man, gosh,
And I know that this has been many years, so like
yeah.
I
I mean,
know
this was
you might say three and it was four or whatever, but just in terms of rough
it
stuff.
was. I mean, it was during the Tanglewood during the summer. The only time we ever rehearsed was in that time. So I'm thinking it was probably by the time we had to come up with start ideas and then got the music and worked it up and then got the list finalized. I'm guessing it was probably a good week or 10 days.
Okay.
But we knew we had to get it by X date, as I recall. I don't remember specifics. I do remember there being a deadline. I do remember we worked many, many hours for days on end to try to come up with it.
Wow.
You know,
I'm seeing on the Discogs site that it excuse me, that it shows that this was recorded at the Berkshire Performing Arts Center in Lenox, August 18th to
right,
20th,
right.
1989, which would have been, I'm guessing, was right after the second Empire Brass seminar session ended. So it sounds like
Yeah.
maybe that was part of the deadline, was maybe the fact that you had to record.
Well, you
Uh,
remember who is it that came out with it not too long ago? An Empire open rehearsal at there. Um, who
yes, who did
who did
post that?
that? It was one of the past members or something. It was about an hour plus.
I remember that. I remember Terry Bingham was in the video, but not. Yeah, but that's not who posted it. I know. I'm gonna have to remember, and I even remember that I know the person, and I can't think
And
of who it
I
is. I'll link to
remember
it in the show notes because it's awesome. It's like actual Empire rehearsing in the cafeteria
right,
at the
which is what
Boston
we
University
did.
Tanglewood Institute
And I
campus.
remember doing that, and I believe some of the stuff that was on that in that session, I recall, was class brass pieces.
I think, oh, it had to have been. Yes, it was. I remember because Terry Bingham recently retired principal trumpet of the Pershing Zone,
Mm-hmm.
U.S. Army Band. He was there at the '89 session, which was the year before I got there.
Right,
So we were able to narrow it down, and that's the year that you were rehearsing and recorded
right.
class brass. So there you go.
So by the time, yeah, that's what we were doing. We're just
Wow.
going over that stuff, and we had that was later on when we had most of the material in place. We were just cleaning it up and
Hmm.
just fixing it.
Wow.
But yeah, that's right. I forgot that when when I heard that video and listened to it, like yeah, and I kind of remember that day too.
Right.
It's funny, it's weird.
Yeah, seeing that video in that cafeteria was like really brought me back. I was there. That was your last year, last
Yeah,
summer with Empire, because the
right,
the next year was when you left and when Eric Russ came in.
right,
But I
right.
remember, and I did see you perform with Empire, but you were gone by the time I got to the Empire Brass Seminar the next year. But that was
Mm.
the very cafeteria where where Rolf lit into people, and where like just like got to play the performance hour at the end of every single week, which was
Yeah,
always intense. So
yes,
good intense. But boy, did I grow quickly. That
Yeah,
first summer I showed up at 14 and was like, yeah, that was eyes were wide, head was on a swivel.
yeah, exactly,
Like,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was there was something amazing about being a young musician in a room filled with people who could all not only tell but would notice when you played like great or way better than your usual great. I mean, it
hmm,
wasn't just good and bad. It was like,
right,
even just if you brought a little extra, it got noticed. It was
right.
yeah,
It's
what a
true.
rewarding place to
Yeah,
learn. So
yeah, it really
yeah.
was.
And then, so talk to me about these sessions, and then I want to circle to the Gabrielli sessions, which you were painting just a crazy picture of.
Yeah.
I won't spoil it. How long? So you recorded this whole album in 3 days, August 18th to 20th, 1989. How many hours a day were these sessions?
They generally were like, a few 3 4 hours in the morning, and then a couple hour break, and then you do another few hours in the afternoon. You know how it is. You kind of pace it depending on the pieces. You try to arrange the pieces so you don't kill each other, chop wise.
Yeah.
But you got to, so you have to get it done because time is money.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it wasn't too bad. I mean, I'm trying to remember which one. I think it was a Gabrielli and the Christmas one. We actually did at the same time,
Okay.
but in two different places. That was fucking intense because we did that whole thing. I forget what the dates on that is, but I remember having to do two CDs in the same 10 days, week and 10 days,
Wow.
and that Gabrielli was just a ball buster.
So yeah, I'll circle back to that. The so if you're having like that long of a session in the morning and then taking a break and then coming back, did you find that it was harder? Now I'm asking a horn player who like you and JD Shaw, you're the two horn players that I have played with who like do like can have done like god tier level stuff like, and no matter how much like that you play, and then like I've never heard either one of you sound tired. And in my 8 years in Boston Brass with JD, I heard him twice say that he felt his chops felt tired. Neither of those times it sounded like it, but it
Mm-hmm.
was like, so, which on the horn is just not. And I've been like spoiled with Chris Castellanos. I mean, I've like a
Mm-hmm.
Jason Ayub. I've gotten to play with some absolute monsters on the horn. But
Yeah.
in that second session, did you feel like was it harder physically or harder mentally if you were going to get tired? Because that's a lot of recording in a day.
Yeah. Usually it was a question of concentration, because if your concentration, as you know, goes, then your awareness to how you're playing goes. The other thing that's significant, and I've mentioned this many times on all the recordings, Canadians too, and the Empire, if we hear it and you hear it, and it's you hear it on the radio or on a CD or or your stereo, and the sound is like right in front of you, right? And it sounds incredible, big, lustrous. But if you listen very, very carefully, I'd say 80, 75% of the time, everybody played mezzo forte. We didn't play loud.
Hmm.
You did it. Now, as you well know, with groups, many groups that you sit in, and especially student groups, everybody kind of ranks up. I can't be here, so I play it. And so the general speaking level is about like this. Generally, that's your mezzo. Well, no, you're going to get fucking tired.
Yeah.
But especially the Canadians were even more so. They had it down. Most of the time, everybody played mezzo forte, mezzo piano. Very gentle, fast air, so nobody was getting punished.
Very
And then when
smart.
you did turn up the heat, it was really noticed, and it color changed, a big sound and everything. It wasn't that everybody was playing wimpy. There was just the quality of sound was the same. It was just a smaller sphere. But when everybody was doing it unanimously, it sounded perfectly balanced. It sounded fine. You didn't notice that they were playing soft. But if you listen to the quality of those recordings, you'll hear most of the time people are playing very easily,
Right.
and the
Oh.
and the sonic sound is that way. So for the most part, except more the Gabrielli, Michael Tilson Thomas too. That was just a killer because there was no rest for anybody,
Right.
which is why we rarely performed that piece.
Right.
At any rate, so for the most part, because we had it down and knew how to play night after night, as you know how to,
Mm-hmm.
a good 2 hours without getting too tired, you knew
Mm-hmm.
you had to be efficient.
Yeah.
Strong, yes. Concentrate, yes. But you had to be light.
Yes.
So for the most part, it was concentration, staying on top of that. But because we've been doing it, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, we knew what we were doing. We also, as you well know, and a lot of people don't know how a really good recording session professionally works. You lay down if it's a big piece, as big a chunk as you can to get a kind of landmark map.
Mm-hmm.
Then you take it apart in chunks.
Yeah.
Little chunks, rest. Okay, let's repeat it again. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Do that.
Yep.
So, and when you do that and you're careful about it, especially working with somebody as professional as Telart, you could do it. You could just pace it right along, just keep right on walking. Nobody got crossed like, I got to take a break. I'm just And the worst thing is too, as you well know, that sometimes in orchestra, which didn't happen so much in the brass because they knew well in advance what to do, except maybe the Gabriella a little bit because it was so huge.
Right.
Most of the time, in orchestra, yeah, let's hear a loud section. We'll adjust the mic. Can we hear that loud section again? So by the time you get to the recording session, you've played the hardest licks 6 times and your chops are fried. Because we can't hear the horns. Well, turn up the fucking mic. But that didn't happen with the brass quintets. As you well know, you're really in control. But recordings can be, if you don't know what you're doing and you're working with non-professionals, even gigs like movie scores and jingles and stuff. If you're working with some bonehead, you're fried before the mic really comes on.
Yeah.
And so
it gets
that
tense
happen.
too. When it's like when you realize that you're not dealing with people who exactly know what to do. Is like, because it's a little bit like being at the airport where there's a lot that's out of your control. So that's not really a great conditions to make great art with. So
it's totally true. Totally true.
Yeah. Wow. So that's interesting. The concentration thing for me now, I play the tuba. I mean, like my mouthpiece is huge. Like tuba mouthpieces massage your face while you play, whereas a horn mouthpiece is very taxing. But I always found that like the end of recording sessions, quintet or otherwise, it was always my brain that would be the thing that would want to trip me up more than just fatigue. And a lot of brass quintet writing also is such that there might be a relatively easy and straightforward tuba line that happens to be under some god tier horn line. And so if there's just like a couple of chipped attacks in the easy tuba line, like that's the cost of doing business. Like you understand that, but that means that you got to play that whole thing all over again. And it's like, so it's almost more stressful. Like the tuba solos, like I was always really prepared for those and like the really hard parts. And I was like, all right, let's do this. And this is my problem to get right. It was almost more stressful at the end of the session to do like the simple stuff underneath the really hard stuff that you or Rolf or whatever would be doing. That's there's a lot of layers there. So
it's true. Yeah. I mean, recordings, any mistake is a mistake, even though you don't have a melody line, like you say. If it's not a clean attack or whatever, then okay. So, and somebody's going to get pissed off. I'm not going to do this a fourth time just because you can't play your fucking instrument. So, but
it's a D flat. It's 1 and 2.
Exactly.
We've played this piece in 15 countries. Like you should know this by now. Yeah. You would think I would, but you'd be wrong. That's pretty funny. All right, very quickly, I want to talk about the Mary Papert School of Music at Duquesne University. They are wonderful supporters of the Brass Junkies, and they are an incredible school of music with unbelievably great faculty. Jim Nova, James Gourlay. It's fabulous. You should check them out. They have made a page. Jim Nova, friend of the podcast, has actually made a video just for Brass Junkies listeners. He even he put on like a collared shirt. He doesn't curse. Like it's very official. But if you want to learn more about studying at Duquesne in Pittsburgh, which is one of the most underrated artistic cities, I think, in America. There's like a lot of really hip stuff going on there. It's like a small city that has like big city opportunities happen, and especially on the brass front. And so you can learn more about that. Follow the link in the show notes. So, Marty, if you decide you want to go back to school, then
okay, I'll keep that in mind.
I'd recommend Duquesne for you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's because I feel like that's really what you need to be doing. Okay, so oh, I remembered something that I was going to say was the knowing not to shout too much. It was 3 summers later after you recorded this. It was summer of '92, where in the Young Artists Orchestra we did Bruckner 4, and it was like it was a killer brass section. It was an honor to be a part of. But that first movement, we played it at Tanglewood on Parade in the shed. It was like
Mhm.
that first movement, letter A, yeah, bah, 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 bah. It's like
Yeah, yeah,
it sounded like the I mean, our attempt at like the Bernstein, like Shostakovich 7, recording with
right.
the CSO was like letter A in the first movement. It was like, so we basically just shouted at the audience for 4 straight
Yeah,
movements because we were just
yeah,
very, very, very excited. So
yeah.
it's hard to not do that, and especially in
Well,
recordings too. It's hard.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You get the all excited about it, and especially something like Bruckner. Just like, come on, much to the chagrin of the string player. They're like, oh God, you know.
I thought
But
all
it's
string
true.
players love Bruckner. Is that not true?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sure. Yeah. It is exciting, but the recording and well, orchestralized. Yeah, yeah. You can. It's there's less in control of your own personal space. You're doing a lot. So especially if you're doing a piece like that, but it can be fun. But boy, like you said, if you dealing with somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, oof,
Yeah, that's hard. Yeah, it's
yeah,
hard. Those Telarc recordings, I'm not surprised to hear how smoothly it went, and just how good they were, but also just the sound is like,
yeah,
and a big part of that is the Empire brass at that time, which just had like a meltdown of sound that I've never experienced before or since. But that doesn't mean that it gets into the microphones and into my ears afterwards. And that label like made that band sound exactly like it sounded when you were 50 feet in
hmm,
front of it, which thank God they did. But that's not a given, and they did an amazing job of capturing it.
they did, they did.
Yeah, real brilliance to the sound.
Hmm.
But there wasn't only one sound. I don't want to make it sound like it was, like there was one, but there was just a real brilliance to it, which I'm so glad that they captured. So
Yeah.
I was raised on those recordings, so it's yeah, it's pretty wild to get to talk to you about this. So what was it like playing these tunes in concert afterwards? Was there did pieces continue to evolve after a recording session, or did they kind of
Um,
settle?
I think for the most part they settled. Some, as you well know, any kind of repertoire, but this was all such a brand new repertoire. Not everything uh, was playable in performance.
Hmm.
It could be by itself, but when you do a whole concert of 2 hours, yeah, it's not practical.
Yeah, sure.
So most of the pieces, though, as I recall, that we did stir into our regular repertoire, um, they worked pretty well. They were done. We fixed it, and that was it. We didn't change very much at all after the recordings. Um,
Yeah.
but again, there was so much material there that uh, it's just too bad it didn't maintain itself and get out more.
Yeah.
You know, but
For
but it
anybody
was
who,
it was challenging. But we had to stir in some more traditional stuff, easier going stuff.
Mhm.
The brass people who didn't know the Empire brass that well or something, would older material and stuff. So we
Sure.
didn't do we stirred in a lot of that, but I mean there was a lot of other stuff too, from Eggle stuff, and which were great.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, there's eight. Well, if you haven't heard this album, then like stop listening to both of our voices right now and go listen to it. I'm guessing anybody that's watching this has heard it, but there's 18 tracks on this, and some of them became like total staples of the Empire Live, like "Simple Gifts"
yeah,
was one, which is like one of my favorites.
right.
That
That was
was
really cool. I remember putting that together, and it was like so interesting. Because everybody had some spectacular moments in that piece,
yes,
and the climaxes and stuff was like, yeah, that was a
yes.
main one of the main pieces we did all the time.
Yeah, yeah, that first time that I heard that Yeah, I just about fell out of my chair. So, and I remember the first time I saw Empire in '88 with you at Tanglewood, and then the second time that I saw Empire was in the spring of 1990, which was after this album. I'd already
Hmm.
memorized it, and I remember when they started when Scott had started with the trombone solo,
Hmm.
and when Scott kicked into that at Sanders Theater, I like just about fell out of my chair as a 14-year-old. I was very, very, very happy. So that was
Yeah,
a formative moment of my life. But yeah, that the horn playing you at the peak of that is just like I'm getting
yeah.
goosebumps literally right now thinking about it. It's just like
That was a really cool. That was one of those, like alpha horn lines I was able to create for myself. That like, oh man, every time you play for this is like gonna take, and it always took people's breath away. It was like,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's like it's orchestral playing in a chamber setting. It was
yeah,
like and
yeah.
I mean, obviously it's an orchestra piece, but but the just like sustained and just like like
Hmm.
almost bombastic and yet like sensitive and with only five people. I mean, it's like I'm not choosing the exact right words,
No,
but
I know.
yeah,
It was that was one of the best arrangements because it sounded a lot bigger than five people. I mean, because of the way it was spread out, the voicings, the
yes,
chords,
yes,
it just sounded huge.
and
Yeah,
live as well, like
yeah,
live as well, and then that one like it like drops off the sonic cliff afterwards, and then the ending is just like is just
yeah,
like just sensitive and beautiful and like yeah, gorgeous, gorgeous stuff.
yeah.
There you go. There's class brass. Um, so now talk to me about the Gabrielli album. I definitely had never heard this. You're talking about
Well,
like
the
giant things
Gabrielli,
hanging and like this
Rolf
is
wanted
crazy.
to do Gabrielli, but what was interesting about it, and it's interesting because when I looked at it the other day, is recorded in Studio A, Berkshire Performing Arts Center.
Hmm.
But that I don't remember what they called it because what I recall is basically, as I told you on the phone the other day, and maybe it was technically called this, but I remember Rolf said we got to check this place out, and it was a recording. It was a double-sized gymnasium in an abandoned or closed down girls' school up in the Berkshire someplace, not too far away actually. I forget the little towns, and I don't remember being in this particular place at all because I remember going in there and he said the sound is amazing. He had gone there. I don't know how he discovered it. We went in there, played a few chords for about 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes or something, and it had like a 6 second echo in tune, balanced with the brass quintet. It was like you just don't get that even in
Right.
churches because it was a wooden floor and an arched wooden ceiling, and it was double sized. So we just thought this would be perfect, and Rolf really had his being his bonnet to do Gabrielli or something from this period. So he got all this music together, and we thought, okay, we'll do it in here. Well, tell our when we did it, it took quite a number of days to sort it out because they they like to echo, but to get this many brass people balanced and so it sounds antiphonal when it needed to, but still not overpowering and too boomy or too whatever what instruments they spent. I was going to at least 2 days, if not 3 days, and too bad there's no pictures of it. But they had these giant tarps that they would hang all over the place to make the echoes refract in a different sort of way, so it's not too boomy or. And then they experiment with putting mics in all sorts of weird places around this gymnasium,
Right.
and it looked very bizarre by the time we did it. Most of the time, oddly enough, we almost were never in the center of the room. We were either had our backs to the walls, everybody, or slightly close to it, a corner or something.
Okay.
You weren't in the center.
Right.
So it was really bizarre that way
Hmm.
to get that kind of sound that they got. But that was really a lot of work. That one, I think that's the one we did in the same time, or right around the same time we did the Christmas rap album that I did.
Okay.
I think this is where we did the two, but that was done not in the same place. That was done someplace else, and I forget where it was. Oh no, no, that was the Bernstein. That was in Symphony Hall. I forget what was that. Christmas one done. Anyway, so yeah, the Gabrielli was amazing, but again, what Telephone did to get that sound, and I still think for a brass ensemble sound, that's still one of the most monstrous, beautifully balanced, huge sounds in some of those licks.
That's the if I close my eyes, well, if I could only take one brass chamber album with me to the proverbial desert island. I'm not sure why I couldn't take unlimited ones now with like MP3s. They don't take much room,
Yeah, exactly.
but it would be the Gabrielli. Yeah, that was yeah, that's what I hear. It's what I
Yeah.
hear when when I think of brass music. That's the one. The trumpet is Jeffrey Kay, of course, Jeff Kurnow, Rolf Smedvig, Joe Foley, Stephen Emery, and some guy named Tim Morrison.
Yeah.
The horns are Danny Katzen, you and Jonathan Menkes. Trombone, John Fietta, Norm Bolter, Ron Barron, Scott Hartman, of course, and Doug Yo. And the tubas were Charles Villarubia, Gary Ofenlock, and J. Samuel Palafian. That's like what a historic
Yeah. Yeah,
like
it was.
every single one of those instruments is
Yeah.
lists is
Yeah.
yeah, that's just incredible.
This recording that was unlike the other quintet recordings. This was a chop buster. You had to really pour it on, and you could tell it. And that's one of the few times I remember being a little tired, like But yeah, it was amazing, just amazing.
And this also was recorded right after the summer. So yeah, for people who don't know how the summer was set up back then, there were two 4-week sessions at the Empire Brass Seminar at the Boston University Tanglewood Institute, and Empire would you all would have a 2 to 3 hour open rehearsal Monday through Friday at least for 8 straight weeks, which is that's a lot of rehearsing. I mean, that's like
Yeah.
15 hours a week times 8 hours, and sometimes it would be to prepare new stuff for recordings like this. Sometimes it would be to prepare new stuff for the upcoming season.
Yeah.
And so it's not surprising that that you chose to record for 2 years, right afterwards.
Yeah. It was the most efficient use of time because in the summertime, we had our thing with Boston University in Tanglewood, so it was a great time to just relax and shed. And then during the fall, we almost never rehearsed. We just played concerts.
Yeah. You can get away with that when you play as many concerts as you used to play. It's like
Yeah,
constantly fine tuning. There's no need to rebuild anything when you never take it apart in the first place. Did Empire, not necessarily this one because there was a lot of people around, but did Empire tend to get along during recording sessions, or did they ever get contentious? Or
well, I mean, how can I put this? Rolf had a certain reputation for not being flexible or listening to anybody. So he could be a real jerk on a good day. So he would be the worst one about it for the most part. And it was most of the time just fending off, what he was doing. And he was in recording sessions, he was all about, did he get it? His stuff, which is everybody, that's what you want to do first. But I don't think, aside from him just being his natural self, which is not a very nice person, honestly. I mean, occasionally he could be okay, but his go-to was not very nice.
Right.
And he was very pushy and about things. But we learned to deal with it. But he also, he knew he had to, in the recording sessions and stuff, couldn't be too much of a prima donna because there's, again, time is money. And we're going to get this done. Might not be my favorite thing to do, but we're going to do it.
Right.
So for the most part, it was pretty good. Occasionally, he could be really ugly to somebody, and it always amazed me how bad he could treat people, and they would just keep on trucking. Although he never treated me that way ever. Yeah. I think he respected me, and he tried when I first joined the group to do that. But then I stopped him and I said, "We're going to do it my way." And because I could always do it,
Right.
he left me alone. And he liked
Right.
my musicianship. So fortunately, he rarely said anything to me.
Right.
You know.
Wow. Yeah, it's kind of like the old, the old adage from the movies, like like when you're in jail, that if you go to prison, like the first day you go and like get in the face of the biggest dude there, and you get
Yeah,
cold cocked once, and then everybody's like, that Marty dude, he's nuts. Like, you leave him
yeah,
alone.
just don't do that.
You
Don't
get
go there.
respect right away. So
Yeah.
that's interesting. So you gave him pushback. You gave him pushback right away, and then he
Well,
kind of gave you
I
some
think
space.
he didn't. When I joined the group, see, he didn't hear he hated the Canadian Brass. He didn't hear the concert that they heard in Cleveland Symphony Hall. And when they came back and said, yeah, Canadians said blah 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 blah, but the horn player was good. He didn't know that, so he only called me because the other guys in the group said, "Why don't you call him?"
So wait, tell us about this concert. Give us the full background for anybody that doesn't know.
Well, um, I had a business relationship fallout with the Canadians, so I resigned. I've mentioned this before, but in a nutshell, this is sort of why it ended up happening the way it did. It looks strange, and then so I finished out the touring with him for a few months before I exited with no plan. Much to the chagrin of my wife, my two young kids, and everybody, but I couldn't said no.
Right.
Anyway, so I got this phone call from Rolf. Said, "Hey, I understand. Would you be willing to come play with us a little bit? Because basically, while I was with the Canadians, Rolf, tuba player in the Canadian,
Sam. Oh,
Sam,
Chuck.
Chuck.
Yeah, yeah.
He called around and was asking who should we listen to, and then he had called Dave, and then Dave sort of said this and so and so and so, and then he said, "How about
Dave
me?"
Ohanian. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yep.
so they flipped that way, and so he left.
Right.
They had
It appeared
everybody.
like it was like a trade in at the top of
Yeah,
the brass quintet
it
world.
really wasn't. I mean,
Right.
Rolf was beside himself. And then so they didn't, so they just called, and then it stuck. So
Okay.
I played. Of course, I played well. Really was fine, and so everybody was happy.
So, but the rest of the band saw you play in Cleveland?
Yeah, it
Okay.
was on tour in Canadians. We played in Cleveland, and I didn't know. I honestly, at that time, I didn't know the Empire Brass.
Okay.
I was just pedaling as fast as I can, just doing what I did. I didn't know they were at the concert or anything about it.
Okay.
But they were, four of them were, not Rolf.
Okay.
So that's how it came about. So those kind of things that happen. When you put yourself out there, as you well know, you get recommendation, you get a call here and there. I mean, that's what happened with Montreal. I did that Romanza CD. It was all my own idea when I went back to Vancouver, and it was really cool CD, cool music. Nobody's really recorded it, and Zerbal, principal in Montreal, he was going to go up for San Francisco, so he just literally took it into Dutoit's office and said, "This guy should be playing principal next year."
Wow.
He listened to Dutoit, listened to the CD, says, "Fine, call him."
Kidding.
So you never know when you put stuff out there,
right?
What's going to happen, but the main thing is just get out there and put stuff out there. Don't have a plan, But with the Empire, and things just happen, And personal level things happen. So that's the reason I left the Empire to go back to orchestra, because I was, the things with those groups that even now to some degree, but in those days it was much harder because we played a lot, and you were on the road all the time. And so personally, while you were artistically doing great stuff, you were every place but no place. You didn't, you know what it's like. You wake up and you don't know where you are, and you realize it doesn't matter that I don't know. You're just gonna get on. You're gonna. So after a while, I was just, and then marriage was falling apart. And I thought, I got to get out. And my old job came back from Vancouver, so I just walked back into it.
Yeah.
But anyway, the thing is that's the thing that I found with the Empire. Some of the Canadians, of course, they had more of a plan because they already established the brass quintet as being this kind of thing. The Empire, in those days, there weren't any other groups to speak of, really. New York, maybe, but they didn't do anything.
Right.
The Empire just their only plan was, we don't want to suck. That's it.
Right.
It wasn't a grand scheme to take over this, or because there wasn't anything to take over.
Right.
So it was really interesting because it was simplified, much more simple than it is now. I mean, with all the downstreaming and all the way, oh man, it's just like, and competition and stuff. So it was very different that way. So it was kind of refreshing because you didn't really have any rule book.
Right.
There were no unions.
Right.
For you, you just like, okay.
Yeah. I am putting on my music business consulting hat for just a second, if I may, because I'm wedging this in between 3 TEM coaching sessions that I have today. What you did, that, like Class Brass is the perfect example, is that you did something that did not exist before. And I think there's a lot of, school teaches you how to just try to do like what Empire Brass has already done. They just try and get you to play a little bit higher and a little bit faster and a little bit softer and a little bit louder, which is all really important because I wouldn't have you on here talking about Class Brass if the brass instrument operating on that album wasn't like possibly the best I've ever heard in my life, like period. But you also like created something that the world, that was the best orchestral arrangement album by a brass quintet ever because it was the first. It's like, yeah, it's like, Lindbergh was the first, who turns out was a very, very, very shitty human being, an anti-Semite, like he was a piece of work, but like we all know who he was because he was the first person to fly across the Atlantic, right?
Right.
Second person to fly was named like Hinkle or Hinky or something like that, and there was some competition. It was like the SpaceX thing, so he did it right after Lindbergh, and he flew faster and he used less fuel. Like every pilot metric, he was better, but nobody knows who the hell he was because he was second. But then the third person to fly, everybody knows because that was Amelia Earhart because she was the first woman, so she was the first in her own category.
Okay.
And so, they don't know her as the third person to fly because who
Right.
cares, right?
Yeah.
So it's like I think you got to just be looking for green pastures, which are
True.
still around. They didn't disappear in the '80s, but I think that
they changed. They've certainly evolved, and they're a little bit more selective. You got to be careful, but yeah, they're here.
They're there. You just got to take some risks.
There's some great players and great ideas going out there. So it's changed, but it's you're true. You got to be a little bit more imaginative and flexible.
Yes, correct. The market still, whether the market means making money or just having an impact artistically on the world, the market still rewards creativity, I think. Yeah. Just execution without creativity, steering the ship is not. There's too many people playing instruments at too high of a level now for that to really, stick out. But the creativity that Empire used to make Class Brass, that'll also be relevant in 50 years and in 150 years. It just will. So, what are you most proud of from your time in Empire?
Wow. Let's see here. I have to say Class, and then the Bernstein.
And I didn't even mean albums. I just meant like in general. But and that Bernstein album is fantastic too.
You mean
just like like when you if like if a grandkid knew nothing and was like like what was so special about your time in Empire Brass? Like what is the thing that you're most proud of in terms of the legacy that either you in the group or the group in general has left behind?
Well, I just think that even if you weren't a brass player, we affected and touched so many thousands and thousands of people, and made them appreciate music, but also appreciate the uniqueness of brass. Like you say, we were some of the first people to really do that. So that's really, you can't ask for anything more than that for a legacy. You really can't.
Yeah.
So I think overall it was really, really neat. I mean, the amount of people we touched was amazing. Like I remember on the Russian tour, before the wall came down, we were in first concert, Symphony Hall, Leningrad, and we were rehearsing. We were there to get settled in, and the hall there is kind of a big old hall, very simple, but big, and they had these ancient, two or three ancient TV cameras, like look like robots, from the 50s, rolling around the stage. And they said, and we said, what's going on? Because nobody told us anything about them. And so, oh, we're broadcasting this live all across Russia. We said, how many people are going to probably listen to it, watch it? 50 million. Or something ridiculous number. And we're like going, what? Because first of all, they don't have anything to listen to anyway. It's not, they go, well, let's go to Netflix. No,
Yeah, right.
You only have one channel. So it was insane, But so I think just overall in all the tours of Japan, I mean, God, as brass playing is insane there.
Yes, it's revered.
So just as a brass player, of course, but just as a musician to help get something that's of beauty and of a high quality to so many people, that was very rewarding, which is kind of unique. You can't ask for that. You can't really necessarily aim for that. It's hard to do nowadays, especially symphony orchestra and stuff. Crowds are thinning out, because it's just not as appreciated. It's not. You don't have to go to a live concert anymore.
Right.
And music is omnipresent, so it was really fortunate to be able to do that on such a visceral, personal level.
Well, you did a real service. I mean, it was a gift to somebody like me, because I think, like you just said, you kind of, these are my words, not yours, but you transcended the limitations of brass in the eyes of a lot of people in the world. And the fact is that you did that by, I basically, I came into being real serious about a tuba player as a youngster, like right as you were already doing that. And so, like, I've never known a world where brass was completely pigeonholed. I mean, and that's because of you. I mean, it's similar to, like, my son will never know a world where he can't just say, like, hey, GOOGLE to the display in our kitchen and then ask what the square root of 97 is, and it'll tell him to, like, 10 decimal points. It's like I'll never know a world where the brass wasn't thought of as being capable of doing whatever the hell it wanted, like in the concert hall, like, not just not just in a beer hall, which, like, and that's no slight to beer halls, like, at all. But
yeah,
you kind of opened up a lot of horizons, which I just came up and I was like, oh yeah, of course brass instruments can do that. Whereas people of your generation had to actually fight for that, which is and
yeah.
did you even know that you were doing that, or did you just do your thing? And then,
no, we really didn't. I mean, like we said, we just didn't want to suck.
Yeah.
And that's really what it was. And like, okay, we got to play in tune. Let's play together. Let's play, sensitively. And once you get the right number, the right combination of people, as you well know, together, you become subservient to what you're trying to do, even though you might not be the tempo you want or whatever,
Yeah.
you're going to make it fit.
Yeah.
So it was something that you just intrinsically just did. But we were, represented in Columbia, sent us out. You want to make money? You make money by playing concerts. Go play concerts all over the place. So, and we wanted to be really good, but basically it wasn't like, well, that's good enough. It was always about, like, how can we do this more, better,
right.
The standard, and keep it up. And again, also learning not to just be stubborn or strong, but be smart and be effective and efficient. And when you see those concerts and any of the videos of that stuff, nobody is straining. Nobody's straining.
Right.
Yeah. And when you see, and we teach a lot of people, like, you've got to be relaxed, but you can't just relax. There's tension because this over here is causing this over here to look like this. And you don't see the connection, but it's the pattern like that. So you got to find ways to do that. Otherwise, that kind of thing just doesn't exist. And we see it all the time. People trying 120%, but that's the best half of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm 47 now. I'm definitely at an age now where if I force stuff, like, my face tells me very quickly that it has an opinion about that. Where when I was 27, it's not that it would sound as good as if I didn't force it, but, like, I could still sound pretty damn good while, like, playing with unnecessary muscle at age 27, on the back half of a Boston Brass show.
Mhm.
But now, yeah, it's like my body has opinions, and and it only I'm told it doesn't get better in your 50s. So
It's funny you say, because I feel like if someone said, what age would you be and want to stay at forever? It would be 50,
there you go.
because I felt like I could do anything still on the horn. I didn't
Hmm.
have to prove anything.
Uh-huh.
I felt physically and equipped to be able to do anything, but I had enough wisdom to know what was important and what wasn't, for the
Fascinating.
most part. And so I would have loved to just stay 50. So and that was me personally.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Um, and 60, I mean, when I came here, I felt a little bit more, somewhat the same way, because I still felt very viable and everything, but um, I felt a little more general fatigued of things, just life in general and
Hmm.
stuff. Whereas at 50, it was like, I made it. This is
Right.
cool, you know?
60 is also when you moved away from me, so that would probably was
Well, that's true.
weighing
That was
weighing
part
you
of it.
down
Yeah, that
spiritually.
that was a huge bummer. That was a huge bummer.
You've never connected those dots before, have you? This has turned into a
No, I
therapy
didn't.
session, Marty.
I didn't. That's right. But yeah, but it's. I mean, even now, I for first few years after stopping playing the horn, uh, I would wake up in the morning having reality dreams of warming up
Wow.
and stuff. Like, it was totally real.
Wow.
And sometimes playing, and then even teaching, I didn't realize how much, as I taught, everybody anybody could play any note at any interval in any piece, or etude or whatever. And as I'm looking at the music, watching them, I knew exactly what it felt like. Like, in my mind, it was real, still happening to me. And I knew, like, your fingers are going to fuck that up. You're not going to make that. Told you, you know. So I knew in real time what was working, what wasn't. Which, when I was playing, I was not aware of it so much.
Hmm.
It was happening, but I mean, I found once I stopped playing, it was weird to actually have this real time video,
Wow.
physical video in my head all the time of what
Interesting.
was going on.
It's almost like somebody who loses one of their senses, and that their other senses become more
Yeah,
fine-tuned.
that's what it was like, and it still is. If I hear a horn or hear something on TV, I'll say, "I want to know what that note is," and I don't have perfect pitch, but I knew, relatively speaking, like, what that is, what's going on, and whatnot. But yeah, it was very interesting that way. So now I just play the guitar a lot, so it's
There
fun.
you go. That's awesome. Yeah, I was joking on the phone with Marty a few days ago that, like, at some point he's going to get tired of reinventing himself just because he does it so often, which is great. Like, it's good. That was not a dig. That's like, yeah, that's
Yeah,
yeah, that's wonderful. All right. Well, I could talk to you for hours, as you know. But this has been unbelievable. Thank you, Marty. I hope you have a
my
wonderful
pleasure. My pleasure. Thank
vacation.
you for asking.
Yeah, of course. When this goes live in just a few days, Marty will be on the beach in Mexico. I'm sure that he will interrupt his vacation to listen to our conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And think if Marty's about to hang out for the bonus episode, if you would like to hear the bonus episode with Marty, going to dig deep on a couple of the topics that we just covered, and I'm also going to hit him up with a couple of things from the complete book of questions, which sometimes these are real gems. They're always good, and then every once in a while they're like, yeah, they're kind of like blow the top of your head off good. Then you can go to patreon.com/the Brass Junkies. And for those of you who have already done that, you are what makes this possible, because there's a lot of expenses, a lot of time that goes into this. And it is all because of you that we get to hear things like Marty Hackleman sharing taking us behind the scenes of reading out of scores to be able to piece together arrangements like on a deadline for Telarc for what ended up becoming Class Brass, which is pretty awesome. So yeah, if you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/the Brass Junkies, and you'll get access to a whole bunch of bonus content as well. And Marty, thank you very much. And
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank
yeah,
you.
and that is going to do it for this episode of the Brass Junkies.